Welcome to Summer School, Club Fantasy's best ball podcast, streaming exclusively on YouTube. I am your host, Austin Amandolia, and as always, Matt Record joining me in the co-host seat. Matt, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Excited to get back to some fantasy football stuff. It's almost July, which means, football's right around the corner. So now's the best time to start thinking about fantasy football.
Yeah, it's kind of wild too because Club Fantasy, if you haven't been following us, we've been dropping new shows left and right all summer. So I feel behind actually on the show, but we're starting sooner than we did last season, which I feel pretty good about. Very exciting. But with that in mind, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Episodes for this podcast are going to air on Fridays at 6 p.m., but we have content coming at you every day. We have Dynasty. We have another best ball show, which I'll talk about a little bit later. We have mock drafts happening all week. We have our redraft show, even DFS golf. So whatever you need, you can get it here. Just hit that subscribe button. But tonight, we're going to focus on a few things. So if this is your first time watching the show, there will be some introduction to like the flow and whatnot. But each week we'll have a different topic. And then we have one segment that's going to kind of recur every week. And then kind of an optional second segment, depending on how you all engage in the chat. So tonight, we're going to discuss some takeaways from the 2023 season and how they apply to our strategy going into 2024 best ball contest. But we're also going to talk about some of our favorite contests that have dropped this year. So you can kind of see what goes into our mind as we're selecting contests, and maybe it'll inspire you to join some different types of contests than what you typically would. And if you drop questions in the chat or in the comment sections, we will get to them in the following episode because this is not a live episode, but we will answer any user questions that come up as soon as possible. So first off, we're starting with lessons learned from the 2023 season. And the first lesson that I just had to start with was don't get exposed. And what I mean by that is when you are drafting on Underdog and on DraftKings, they show your exposure rates to certain players. And so you can see how frequently you've been going after your favorite player this season, that sleeper candidate that you think is going to break out. But there's some risk involved in getting overexposed. And I want to talk about one person in particular who, if you were exposed to him last year, it was very sad. Matt, do you have any idea who I might be talking about?
I think I know. I think he might have played 4 offensive snaps the entire year.
Yeah, it's almost a record, I feel like, for fewest offensive snaps in a season. Yes, I'm talking about Aaron Rodgers. He's the headline image for this show. It's what caught you to click on that image, on this link, the New York Jets hype happening left and right. Aaron Rodgers played 4 offensive snaps last year. And let's say you decided, oh, I'm all in on this Jets offense last year, and you had 50% exposure to Aaron Rodgers last year. Your lineup was dead before the season even really started. And that's just so disappointing. So we want to talk about exposure rates and how we kind of handle our exposure to different players to prevent having that situation happen to us. Matt, how are you handling exposure when you're doing your best ball drafts?
Yeah, so I like to get obviously everyone has their guys, right? You have people that you really like, and I think what the way I handle it. So I often try to diversify my assets in these best ball leagues. Yes, I know you're randomized where you're picking from, right? So that can kind of change who you get, especially your like uh, what load bearing guys, like load bearing walls. For your rush. So I try to mix it up. I don't care as much later rounds. So if you're talking like the last 5 rounds, where you're kind of slim pickings already, like there I'm more gravitating towards the same people, which I think is a little less risky because you're kind of taking dart throws then anyway. So I do think about it less later on in the drafts, but definitely right in the start. I think it's fun to have a little bit of scoops of all of the different ice cream flavors, so you don't want to be reliant on one person, especially in these tournaments, because not just a dramatic injury could happen. Like people could just not be as good as we expected them to be. So I think diversity is important.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Do you have a certain like percentage threshold of exposure ratings that you'll like aim towards for certain players?
Yeah, I'd say like 30% usually, because I mean, there are people that are your guys for a reason, right? Like you think they're going to be successful, but it's a guessing game. So 30% for me balances the like. Yes, I like them. They're on a good majority of my teams, while also if they go down, I'm not going to be completely screwed.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That's about where I'm aiming as well. During the pre-draft best ball contest, those big boards and small boards, I somehow made it out with no player exposed over 30%, which felt really good to me. And I agree with you on that point that Matt you made about the towards the end of drafts when you're kind of all of these are free picks anyways. I do stress less about exposure rates at that point. I will still try and diversify a bit, but an example of this is like Kate Otten is pretty much free in a lot of drafts, especially in the pre-draft best ball leagues. He was my most exposed player in pre-draft best ball, which I love Kate Otten. If you watched the DFS Academy show last year, I was picking him a ton in cash lineups. So, but I'm with you, Matt. I try to stay below that 30% range. And what's most important to me too is making sure that I'm doing it intentionally. So if I'm picking a player often, I want it to be someone that I really believe in and I believe that they're going to pay off. I don't want to just accidentally end up on the same players. It's okay to take stances and to be more exposed to certain players than other players might be, but don't just do it by accident. You want to have a strategy and be mindful, especially if you're joining a ton of contests. Now, if you're joining just one contest, like go for your guys. But if you're as you're joining more and more, you want to start to think more about this portfolio approach. Similarly, second lesson learned is to just be careful when reaching on players in drafts. And Matt, I think when I say don't reach, you know exactly what I mean. But somebody who's never played basketball before may not, or even played fantasy football before, may not know exactly what I'm thinking when I say that. So, Matt, when we're talking about reaching on players, what are we talking about?
Sure. So every site that you have, from Underdog to ESPN to MFL, they have ADP, right? And they often rank players uh, based off of scoring settings and or whatever factors go into the rankings on the site. So um, typically, if you know nothing about fantasy football, you have at least some sort of guide, some template, as it were, for the players that should be picked in certain orders. Now, those of us that are more in the game know that all those rankings and ADP can be flawed for many reasons. Like right now on Sleeper, all the rookies are super high up because they're popular because dynasty folks are drafting them higher. So reaching the TLDR is picking someone earlier than they necessarily need to go. So whether that be on ADP wise, rankings wise, just drafting someone higher than what the consensus is for when they should be drafted. Now we know that this could be good, could be bad, but I think we're going to talk about some scenarios right now where it didn't really work out.
Yeah, I think that's a great summary. Like sometimes reaching is great, you need to do it. Sometimes you can get a little carried away, and it's really with about how much you're reaching. If you're reaching more than a round on a player, and you're thinking like, okay, we have 12 team leagues. This player, I'm at the 101, and I'm picking a player who is projected to go in the second round, maybe towards the end of the second round or beginning of the third round. That is a really significant reach. And that's the type of reach that might kill your team. I'm speaking of a specific example here where in a contest that I played in last year, the first overall pick, not by me, was Jalen Hurts,
Mm.
which was wild because Jalen Hurts was a second, third round pick by ADP on Underdog Fantasy last year. Here's the opportunity cost. This is the main point. What is the opportunity cost of taking Jalen Hurts at the 101? You didn't get Christian McCaffrey at the 101. And there was no player that had higher advance rates in best ball drafts last year than Christian McCaffrey. And so you basically just tanked your lineup right there. You could have had the best player for fantasy football. Instead, you took a quarterback who took a step back, didn't have the ceiling season that would have warranted that 101. And so that's kind of the main point there is when you're reaching, don't reach just to reach or because like, oh, well, I need to pick this player because of this reason. Like sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes your draft spot isn't going to be set up to allow you to take every single player that you want. And so you have to kind of be flexible. You have to be willing to change your strategy. Now, like Matt said, there are some times where you might reach a little bit. Matt, what's an example of a time where you might try and reach more than you typically would?
Yeah, typically for me, it comes when trying to stack, a QB wide receiver. And I kind of my approach is I look at how many picks are between my current pick and my next one, right? So if you are sort of in the middle, there's going to be 12 picks between yours and the next one. It's like, will this person be back? Will this person be back when I pick again? So for your example, Jalen Hurts at 101, I guess might not have come back. So I guess their thinking was, oh, I got to get this guy right now. But just ridiculous that they went him 101. But for me, let's say I end up with Richardson right there on the Colts, and I'm just sitting there thinking, ooh, there's a big stretch of wide receivers that are about to go off the board. I don't know if I'm blanking. I'm blanking on the Colts number one. Who's that guy?
Michael Pittman.
Michael Pittman. That's him. Where like I don't know if I like him more necessarily than the other wide receivers on the board, but I really want that stack. I'll take him.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to approach it. And again, I still won't do it necessarily if like I have 2 rounds before Michael Pittman is supposed to go up. But
Right.
if I think Michael Pittman might go in the next 12 picks in particular, I'm like, I want to get that stack. That's valuable to me, particularly if there isn't a receiver that you think is better than him ahead of that, right? Like if Chris Olave is available ahead of Michael Pittman, I might be like, you know what? I'm just gonna settle for Chris Olave, and I'll stack Anthony Richardson with another player later on. Obviously, we're talking hypothetical because ADPs aren't such that you would even get Anthony Richardson before either of those receivers. But the point being that you gotta be strategic about when you're reaching on players, and you don't want to do it too much because it could really harm your team.
Yeah, and I'll say one more example too. I'd say when there's a player that's like the end of a tier, right? So we kind of think about
I like
players
that.
in tiers. So like tier 1 of tight ends for this upcoming season, right? Like historically, it's been like Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, maybe George Kittle, right? Kyle Pitts, maybe would be the start of the second tier. So if I see and when you're thinking about these tiers, it's just like, yeah, they are like the cream of the crop, right? Or they're sort of the next tier, so on and so forth, like a tiered cake. So I will reach on someone if I see like, oh, the cliff is about to happen at any position. I want to get the last one before that cliff falls off.
Yeah, I think that's exactly true. Now, looking at our third takeaway, this is one, it's actually a question for me. And I kind of want to have a discussion about this one because I am honestly struggling with this one myself. My question is, should we be drafting 3 quarterbacks this year?
Hmm.
The best practice for many seasons has been 2 to 3. And there's a lot of advantages to having 2 quarterbacks instead of 3 because then that's another receiver slot you can have. That's potentially another running back slot you can have. So you have more players at those positions that where there's more variance. You have more opportunities to have a player that hits their ceiling. But I want to talk a little bit about the quarterback position over the past 2 seasons. And here are some stats. The first set of stats come from NFL.com. In 2023, there were 66 quarterbacks who made a start. That is more than 2 for every team. That's just over 2 for every team. And I went through and I counted 15 that played in all 16 relevant best ball fantasy football games. So only 15 quarterbacks. That means that like every team, just about like you have a 12-team league. So that means only 3 teams could have possibly been able to have 2 quarterbacks who started the whole season. Everybody else, there was some kind of other bonkers nonsense going on. Even worse in 2022. So this is now a 2-year trend. According to CBS Sports, 64 quarterbacks made a start in 2022. That's basically the same as it was last year. And only 11 started all season long. 11 quarterbacks in 2022. So that means in every underdog draft, at least one team did not have a quarterback start the entire season. This has been a major shift over the past 2 years. And we're going to talk specifically about drafting quarterbacks in a future episode and talk about some of the stats behind it. But spoiler alert, there were more teams last year that advanced with 3 quarterbacks and 2 quarterbacks. So my question to you, Matt, do you think this is a strategy now moving forward, is having the quarterback insurance? Or do you think we've just had a couple of seasons of bad luck injuries and bad quarterback play by the starters that has kind of caused these 2 outlier seasons in terms of quarterback starters and health?
Yeah, I think it's a trend that we have to pay attention to. I mean, I feel like, especially recently, I don't know if it's because the dudes are just faster and they're hitting harder, but like injuries are more prevalent than ever, right? And I don't know, it's just the media attention. Regardless, QB spot is so important in best ball. They score you the most points. They have the ball in their hands more often than these other positions. So yeah, losing your quarterback, like if you went, let's say Jalen Hurts at the 101, and then you drafted Aaron Rodgers in the second round, like your season's done before it even begins, right? So I've always been the more risk averse best ball player. So I've always done the let's get 3, let's make sure I have someone. I always think about the bye week, like, oh, I want to have 2 options there. But with all of these injuries, with all of the injuries and just variability out there, yeah, I think 3 is the way to go. Now, there's a certain amount of luck to win these things anyway, right? So if you end up with 2 absolute studs, I'm saying, like, if you get like Josh Allen and we'll say Dak Prescott, who finished, regardless of how he does in the playoffs, regular season, great fantasy football player, I'd feel pretty confident that they're going to be fine. And if one of them goes down, you're going to be screwed anyway. But yeah, no, I think if it works out, if it just falls to you that you can get a decent third QB, I don't see why not.
Yeah, I'm starting to lean that direction as well. What's most interesting to me about it is in those smaller contests. So, like, I do, as if you've watched the show before, I do a lot of 3% contests because I feel like I have a high success rate at that. Um, I had a team last year, 3% league, where I was like, I'm just drafting 2 quarterbacks, whatever.
Mm.
I had Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert.
Ooh.
That felt great starting out the season. And then Joe Burrow off to a slow start, out for the season. Justin Herbert eventually out for the season. And I was like, well, this lineup's done. So I think especially in those smaller contests where, all of the players you're drafting are good, and it's more specifically, all of the receivers you're drafting are going to be good,
Mhm.
most likely, unless you're doing some really dumb stuff, then I might be more prone, especially in those cases, to go to 2 or 3 to go to the 3 quarterback route. Now, to your point, Matt, there's a lot of luck in the tournaments that we're going to talk about in a second. So maybe I'll still do some 2 quarterback builds there because I want to, it's a tournament. I'm betting on kind of a 1 in a million chance anyways. So why not just stick with the 2 quarterback build there? Speaking of those contests, though, we're going to talk about our favorite contests to enter. And the reason I want to talk about this is because Matt and we kind of have some different approaches on how we choose our contest when we're entering contests on Underdog and DraftKings. And so kind of wanted to be able to have a discussion about the differences between our approaches. Now, I'm only talking about tournament contests here because they have the names and they're the ones that we can kind of reference more easily. But I'll preface this by saying, like, I enter, like I just said, a lot of 3%, a lot of 6% leagues, because for me, my goal is to try and be profitable. And I think that is a way for me to help break even during the season. And I have some data to suggest that that's a good strategy for me. But when I'm entering tournaments, I try to go for some of the higher entry fee tournaments that I think have more advantageous advancement rates. Now, I'm not quite to the point where I have a bankroll where I'm doing the big dog or any of those like $100 plus contests, but there are some contests that, they're $35 entry fee or a $12 entry fee that I think less people will enter because they see them as more expensive. You get fewer bites at the apple, but I like them for a few reasons. So Underdog has run 3 contests so far this year that I all are very similar in their structure that I really love. So they've had the Greyhound, the Golden, and the Pug. All 3 of these are similar in that they are limited max entries. So the Greyhound and the Golden, you get 1 entry. It's a single entry contest, which I love any kind of single entry tournament, whether it's DFS or best ball. And the Pug was a 3 max entry, so you could enter it 3 times. And I loved that first off because that limits the ability for these players that are just doing best ball all the time or have a lot of bankroll to spend to enter 150 different lineups. And I'm competing against all of that. Instead, I'm competing against people taking their one best shot. But the thing I love even more about these 3 contests, they all have a very similar advancement structure. So you still have to be in the top 2 of 12 to get past the first round. But what I love is that after that, they all have a similar thing where it's between 4 and 6 players per round in the quarterfinal and the semifinal. And so instead of these being in a contest where you have to be the top 1 out of 12 in weeks 15 and 16, you could be the top 1 out of 5 and make it. And that just feels so much easier, so much more attainable to me. And I feel like those later weeks, I'll have a higher advantage to be able to continue advancing towards the final. Of course, I still have to make it to the quarterfinals and the semifinals, so I have to keep my strategy on point. But I do feel like there's an advantage that can be had, and you are paying a little bit more money, but that's coming with the benefit of potentially more advantageous contest. So that's my approach and some of the contests that I'm loving this year. Matt, what about you? What are some of the contests that you're loving entering this year?
Yeah, I mean, I love talking about the approach because you have to be so you got to plan for where your money's going, right? So I love hearing that, your favorite contest, you're trying to make money. Obviously, we're all trying to make money, right? However, the way I approach best ball is kind of like my filler, my like, okay, I can be drafting all of the time, right? But then I don't have to worry about setting lineups into the future. So my favorite best ball tournaments here. The puppy on Underdog, so $5 entry fee. One of those ones where there's no max number of entries you can enter, right? So you can have just a billion of them. So you're kind of able. The way I approach it is I get to just have a bunch of lottery tickets, right? Maybe one will pay off, maybe not. Obviously, it is harder to win money that way, but uh, I just love best ball for the drafting portion, and then not having to worry about it. So I love the puppy, and then the Scott Fishbowl satellites on Underdog. You're not playing for money; you're playing for a chance to get in that Scott Fishbowl. However, all of your money is going to charity. So again, I get to scratch that itch of competition and drafting, and kind of getting data for maybe some of these other ones for ADP, either Scott Fishbowl or the other tournaments, all for charity, right? So like again, I'm not really playing best ball for the money, which is why I like those lower ones. However, if you are trying to win money, yeah, I think we talked about this last year too, so check out our previous episodes about why those more expensive ones maybe is your better bet to make some money.
Yeah, I love that. And, we talk a lot about making sure the contest you enter match your goal. And Matt's goal is to have fun and to get to
Mhm.
draft all summer long and have those lottery tickets. My goal is to be a little bit more strategic and think about like, what are the ways that I can maximize my profits? And there's nothing wrong with that. There's no right or wrong way. It's just about whatever is the most fun for you and how you enjoy playing these contests. So with that, we're going to turn to our final segment, and this is going to be one of our recurring segments throughout all of these episodes. We're going to be talking off-season narratives every week, tracking some of the latest NFL news, and figuring out what does this mean for my best ball draft, because it's a time of year where people are scraping the bottom of the barrel for news. It's June. There's no football. Training camp hasn't even started yet. And when it does, it's just going to get worse because people are like, oh, we have content we can talk about now. And you're going to see some wild takes coming out. And that's where a lot of advantages can be had in the fantasy football world. So we're going to start with some Anthony Richardson news. So before I say anything about the Anthony Richardson news, I will just throw out his ADP on Underdog Fantasy. He is currently quarterback 5 on Underdog. His ADP is 57. So what is that? That's in the 5th round, I believe. That's in the 5th round of drafts. He's going as the 5th quarterback overall. And this week, June 26th, there was a news article on ESPN. Colts general manager says quarterback Anthony Richardson remains full go for camp. So if you're wondering, was there ever a question about him being a full go for camp? Yes, there indeed was. There was some issues during OTAs and minicamp where Anthony Richardson got a little banged up. He had some shoulder fatigue creep in towards the end of camp. They had been doing a lot of past work with him, and so they sat him for part of the day. But also, interestingly, there was one play where apparently Richardson had a back spasm and kind of went off to the sidelines after a throw during one of the practice sessions, and ended up having to use a foam roller to kind of work out the muscle. He did return to throwing, but then the next day, that was when he had that shoulder tightness, and they kind of removed him for the rest of the day. So this all, and by the way, that news is coming from the Indy Star, from Joel Erickson at the Indy Star. That report was on June 6th. So June 6th, he has some of these injury concerns, and then a few weeks later, we hear the GM, Chris Ballard, saying, oh, he's a full go for camp. Matt, what are you doing with this information, knowing that Anthony Richardson is going QB5?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe he's going QB5. I mean, the hype is getting out of control. I mean, obviously, he was great for just a very small stretch of last year, right? Very small. So people are projecting oh, he's going to crush it this year. He's like the next guy to step up, kind of like the Jalen Hurts of a couple years ago, where it's okay, giving him a full season of health and a full season at the helm there with the weapons he has, he's going to be great. I am worried about the injury risk, right? So you're drafting him QB5. You're drafting him to be your QB1, right? The best ability is availability, and if you are going to get hurt, right, you aren't helping my team, right? So just the mere fact that Richardson's going 5th overall and there's injury risk, I'll let someone else take him as the QB5, and I'll more than happily draft whoever is QB6, who might be in a more stable spot just a little bit later. Do you happen to have who's right around him there?
Yes. So as for reference, so Anthony Richardson's QB5, going just a few spots ahead of him is Patrick Mahomes at QB4. And then the 5 quarterbacks going after Anthony Richardson. So CJ Stroud is QB6 going at the beginning of round 6. And then you wait a full round and a half until you have Kyler Murray, and then another half round for Joe Burrow, another half round for Dak Prescott, and then Jordan Love comes very shortly after Dak Prescott.
Yeah, so a bunch of dudes that are a little more established. I put Stroud kind of in the same category as Richardson in the sense of about to enter his second year. We don't know. We expect sky's the limit, but the second year regression is right there. You're telling me I can get Dak Prescott, who has a bit maligned because of the playoff record, but has already finished as a top 5 player with a very similar receiving core a whole round and a half later than the injury-prone Richardson. Yeah, give me Prescott.
Yeah, I am also very nervous about the ADP on Anthony Richardson right now, given we're seeing some continued injury concerns, even just during mini camps. And I think this will be something to track as we move into training camp. Does this continue to be a trend? Is he missing time every now and then, or having to step off the field due to an injury? That is time lost, and that him already having that wear and tear on his body now, 17 games is a long season. And so him coming in not fully healthy is the thing that concerns me. All of these guys are going to be hurt by week 16 to some degree. That's just the nature of football. It's a violent sport. But starting the season with those injuries already is kind of what makes me nervous about Richardson at his ADP. If he were going in the QB 10 range, I might feel way more comfortable taking that risk because I'm saying, like, I'm taking some dart throws at quarterback anyways, and I'm probably stacking my team with a bunch of really good receivers and running backs ahead of that, and having Richardson as that projectable second year jump. So from 1 star in the making already to 1 first round bust is the next one. Is that, I mean, I guess that's what we have to call it at this point. So from, and this was about 2 weeks ago, June 13th, and this article was put up by The Athletic by Lauren Morello and Alec Lewis, but it was quoting Kevin O'Connell, who was asked about the quarterback battle as the Vikings enter training camp. Yes, the Minnesota Vikings have a quarterback battle between Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy. And O'Connell says, I would say Sam would be the guy I would look to based upon the spring he's had, where he's at in his career and his quarterback journey. So this has now been extracted. And again, this was 2 weeks ago. So as of 2 weeks ago, we're thinking that heading into week 1, Sam Darnold is the QB1 in Minnesota. Now, by ADP, that is not what is happening right now. By ADP, JJ McCarthy is being drafted as the QB 29. His ADP is 205. I can't even tell you what round that is, but let me just say he's free. And even more free is Sam Darnold, who is going off the board at QB 34. His ADP is 215, which when you get to the point where you have a 215 as your ADP, what that's saying is sometimes you're not getting drafted. In fact, maybe most of the time you're not getting drafted. So O'Connell is suggesting that Sam Darnold is the QB1 heading into week 1, but JJ McCarthy is being treated as the QB1 in Minnesota in terms of ADP. So Matt, are we drafting these quarterbacks wrong, or is there something else at play here?
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, this is the peak season of, oh, the rookie QBs need to learn the NFL. Like, we're not going to put them in harm's way, and then it's going to look, I think, drastically different come September when the games actually start mattering and the teams are trying to, win. So I feel like we're still drafting the players on the QB situation and the Vikings correctly. However, you got to remember these best ball things, they're redraft, right? Like, I don't care that JJ McCarthy might be the face of that franchise for the next 15 years. Like, all I care about is this year, right? So I think it's very much on team dependent. I'm assuming you're drafting them. I mean, obviously at the QB 28, like they're a QB 3, so you're not really relying on them. So if you're going that 3 QB route, you're less dependent on them doing well for you to do well, I think. Which earnestly, I think leads me to like Darnold a little more, to be honest. Like, you would love to have the quarterback that's throwing to Justin Jefferson, right? Like that, whoever that is, you would like that person to be on your team, especially at the QB3 price tag. So I think the way I'm handling it is I will be more reluctant to go for Sam Darnold. We know who Darnold is. He's not great, but I do think there's a world where he, at least plays for the first half of the season before getting McCarthy out there. But definitely a situation where you got to hack and monitor it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think too, there's, when you're drafting these players, you need to think about like, what role are they playing on your team? So if you're playing in a tournament, you need to be good enough to advance to the playoffs, but also those playoffs, the week 15, 16, 17 are the most important parts of the tournament. And so if you've drafted a team where you have players like Jalen Hurts or Josh Allen, and it's like, this is going to be my guy starting off, like every week he's going to be my starter, then maybe you take JJ McCarthy because you just need him to pop at the end of the year. You need him to be another insurance if Josh Allen has a down week, right? And those weeks, 15, 16, 17 game. Alternatively, if you're shopping in the Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers tier, 2 guys that are coming off of Achilles injuries and might have a slow start to the season, you might want a guy like Sam Darnold, who starts off the season more consistently and can be an insurance bet to help you get to the playoffs. betting on Cousins and Rodgers having a good second half of the season. So I agree. I don't think there's a wrong answer on these quarterbacks right now. I think how you draft them, though, should be based on your overall strategy and the role they're going to serve on your team. So that is going to be all for this week. Thank you for joining us on Summer School this week. Before you go, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We go live every day on YouTube. If you're looking to practice what we discussed during this show, we have our other best ball podcast, Masterclass, on Tuesdays at 8:30 with Gator J and Stacy Perez. They're drafting. They're not just mock drafting. They're drafting actual best ball drafts every Tuesday night. We also have dynasty shows on Sundays and Thursdays now. We have mock drafts happening all the time, Monday, Thursday, and Saturday. And our DFS golf show posts on Tuesday. And of course, our flagship show, no pun intended, airs on Wednesdays. And when the season starts, we'll have our DFS podcast return. So stick around. You should be following us. You need to be in the know on all of our content. But for Matt Record, I'm Austin Amendolia. This has been Summer School. And until next time, remember, defense wins championships, offense wins fantasy football, and best ball wins money. We'll see you next time.